Well, hey everybody, welcome back to Jericho Road. We've been looking at the world of Jesus through the Gospel of Mark, and now finishing the Gospel of Mark with Easter, I want to go to an Easter story that's only found in the Gospel of Luke. It's the story of Emmaus. And with the story of Emmaus comes a mystery, and also we're going to try to solve that mystery and also answer an obvious question. But first, let's read the text and we'll dig. It's Luke chapter 24, beginning with the 13th verse. Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. And while they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What were you discussing with each other while you walk along?" And they stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the third day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early in the morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into glory?" Then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself and all the scriptures. And if we keep reading, we learn that Jesus broke bread and then appeared to them and then vanished. And then after this revelation of the risen Christ, they go back, these men, and they meet with the disciples and they proclaim the risen Lord, and it's Easter. But there's a mystery here, and the mystery is around the place of Emmaus. Okay, it happens in verse 13. Now, on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. I'll show you a picture of a lovely Crusader church, which means that it was built in the 11th century. Beautiful frescoes. It commemorates this scene on the road to Emmaus. And it's 7 miles from Jerusalem. That's why they built it there. It's now in the current Arab-Israeli village of Abu Ghosh, and it is one of the prettiest churches that you'll ever see anywhere in the world. It's in its simplicity and its beauty. The artwork is stunning. However, there's a problem. First of all, there's nothing named Emmaus there. It's 7 miles outside of Jerusalem on an ancient road. I mean, that's why they built it. They followed the text. But there is a town called Emmaus, just not here. The town called Emmaus, which existed in the world of Jesus and before, is 20 miles outside of Jerusalem down the same road. I'll show you a picture of an old church. This is a late Roman church, meaning anytime you find a church that's built in the 4th or 5th centuries, pay attention. Oftentimes, these early, sometimes we'll say Byzantine, these early churches were built with some oral memory. They were built within generations of an event happening so that they knew where things happened. A good example of this, it doesn't always work this way, but it often works this way. And a good example is the Church of the Beatitudes on the Sea of Galilee, which is a beautiful Roman Catholic church built in the 1920s. It has a beautiful view of the lake, and it's a great place to read and to think about the Sermon on the Mount. I love to read the Beatitudes with groups when I take them there. However, Idan can show you a Byzantine church, the ruins of one about 300 yards down the hill, and for that reason, he believes that that's the site where the Sermon on the Mount actually happened, right? The early church becomes evidence, really, of oral memory and people knowing where something actually happened. So what you've got here is you've got a church built 7 miles outside of Jerusalem. You've got a church built 20 miles outside of Jerusalem in a place called Emmaus, but it doesn't add up with the text. So what do? Well, if you have any kind of study Bible, and most of us have footnotes in our scripture anyway, you can learn that the Greek word for 7 miles is 60 stadia. That's a unit of measurement, stadia. So that 60 stadia would be 7 miles. However, if you look at the notes in your Bible, you'll see that other ancient manuscripts will say 160 stadia, which is about 20 miles. So what this means is that if you look at some manuscripts will say 20 and some will say 7. What happened? Well, let's remember what we know about books in the ancient world. The movable type didn't happen until the 1500s, right? The Gutenberg press, that sort of thing. So books were always copied by scribes, by monks, if you will, copied over and over, which means that books were rare and very expensive and very time-consuming and certainly quite beautiful. And it is quite possible that the ancient manuscripts that say 160 stadia were simply copied with the 100 left off. I mean, it is no stretch to imagine a sleepy scribe in a dimly lit room by candlelight just leaving off a stroke, and thereby a Crusader era church is built because of a sleepy monk. I mean, the reality is that some texts will say 160 stadia and others will say 60 stadia, but the village of Emmaus is 160 away, and I believe that solves a little bit of the mystery. But it still doesn't answer a question when it comes to Emmaus, and that is this: why the road to Emmaus on Easter Day? Why the road? It's a western road. It's away from Galilee, when all the Gospels tell us that Jesus was headed to Galilee after Easter. Remember, my favorite verse in the Bible is Mark 16:7, which is, go. The angel says, go, tell the disciples and Peter that he's going ahead of you to Galilee, just as he said he would. Go tell the disciples and Peter, because I love that, because I'm Peter and I'm no prize, but I'm saved by grace. But the message is clear. He's going to Galilee. John chapter 21 is an entire chapter devoted to Jesus, risen from the dead in Galilee, on the shores of the lake, eating fish with charcoal fire, forgiving Peter 3 times for the mistakes that he made. But it happens in Galilee. Galilee is the place of mission. Galilee is the place of explaining. Galilee is the place where they will know fully what life with the risen Christ will mean, right? That's who they learn who they are. But Emmaus is not on the way to Galilee in the way that they would know it. So to answer that question, why Emmaus? Why that direction? Why that westward walk, if you will? I want to go to a much older story. I want to get us thinking about a problem that Jesus may have been solving when it comes to walking to Emmaus. Okay, this is the older story. Goes like this. I'm going to show you a picture of a field. Maybe it doesn't look like much, but it's a picture of Ekron. I took this picture. I know it just looks like basic agriculture. The Israelis are very fond of their agriculture because they live in a world with very little water. And so every bit of water is used, wastewater from the cities, of course, desalinated seawater. They're very proud of their farms. But in the middle of this farmland is a tell, and a tell is an artificial mound made by an ancient city. It's about 20 feet above the fields around it. And I was standing on top of the tell, and I took the picture of this straight road because something very, very, very important happened beneath the dirt beneath my feet. So I'm going to tell you the story. In the 4th chapter of the book of 1 Samuel, we're told that God's people lost the ark. Now remember what we know about the ark. The Ark of the Covenant was a box that carried the 10 Commandments within it. And so the prophet Eli, who was the prophet at Shiloh, and we're told by the Talmud, which is a commentary on the Hebrew Bible, that the ark rested at Shiloh for 369 years. The prophet Eli had 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, who had a bright idea, which was to bring the ark into the battle against the Philistines a few miles to the west of them. They wanted to be mighty like Joshua, bringing the ark of God with them into the battle so that God would somehow smite the enemy. Well, it didn't go all that well. The Philistines, first of all, utterly routed the Hebrew army, and then they captured the ark, and they captured it, and they took it, and they passed it from city to city to city, from Ashdod to Gath, then to Ekron, which I have pictured here. Now, things did not go well for the Philistines while they had the ark of God. Remember, they're not believers in the God of the Hebrews, and God afflicts the Philistines with terrible maladies. We're told, and we're not told exactly what they are, but we're told that they were afflicted with tumors and with mice. Rats everywhere, and then tumors on their bodies, and apparently Ekron was the worst hit of all the cities that passed around the ark of God like a hot potato. And before I go any farther with the story, I want to answer another question, which is, who are the Philistines? Why are they at war with God's people all the time? The Philistines I like to call the Philistines the bad boys of the Bible, right? They're the bad guys. Samson fights the Philistines. Goliath is a Philistine. Delilah is a Philistine. It seems like they're always the Philistines are in battle with King Saul, and the Philistines kill Saul. The Philistines are just kind of always around, always making war, always making trouble. Who are these people? Well, Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 23 says that they come from Caphtor, which is an ancient word for Crete. So they were a sea people, which is another word for them, who were displaced from that part of the Mediterranean, and they were looking for a home. They arrived in the Near East, or the land which would be Judea. They arrived there some 1,100 years before Christ, and we've learned from archaeology, gosh, we've looked at graves now from this period of time, and learned that that the DNA within these bones are European origin as opposed to Semitic in origin. So we know that they're from somewhere like Greece or that area. Well, anyway, that's a collision course because they arrive in what would become Judea at the same time as Joshua and the 12 tribes. And so the reason why they're the bad boys of the Bible is because they're all fighting for living space. They're on a collision course for territory. This is why they're a problem in this part of the Hebrew Scriptures. And then they disappear. I asked my friend Don, whatever happened to the Philistines? You just sort of don't hear about him anymore. And he explained to me that they disappeared in the Babylonian exile. What happened was the Babylonians, remember, some 600 years before Jesus' birth, took the Hebrews and the Philistines and anyone else they could gobble up and took them far away into exile to a foreign land because they wanted them to disappear. I think it's remarkable that the Hebrews, who, if you think about the warnings of the prophets, wouldn't do right, wouldn't be different, wouldn't remember the poor, chased after false gods, did all the things that God warned them not to do, removed God's cover of protection from them, if you will, by their own behavior. Once they were taken into exile, they rose to the occasion. They were different in the way that God asked them to be different, and they even wrote down the Bible, and they taught the little ones, and they came back a people united with a religion. You could say that they lost their temple, and in Babylon, they got their faith, right? The going got hard, and they rose. Well, what happened to the Philistines is that they disappeared, which is exactly what the Babylonians wanted to happen to God's people as well. But there's a story there too, right? When we lose faith and we lose heart and we lose hope and we give up, this is exactly what happens to the Philistines. Well, they're around here in this story in 1 Samuel chapters 4 through 6, and the Philistines want to get rid of this ark because they are afflicted with these terrible maladies. So they come up with a plan. They make golden representations of mice and the tumors, which was something that they did in those days. If you wanted to be healed, you would go to the doctor with some representation of what's bothering you. If you got a hurt hand, you'd bring a hand. I mean, that kind of thing. And so they make golden representations. They took two cows, and they're called milch cows, which is a cow that is reserved for milking or reserved for its milk. Any animal is a milch animal that's reserved for its milk. Separate it from its calf, which is a miracle because a cow will not leave a calf behind. They yoke it to a cart, and they send it on this straight road much like the picture that I showed you from Ekron. That can't be the same road, but the same idea. A straight road, 7 miles to a place called Bet Shemesh. I want to show you a picture of Bet Shemesh that is quite remarkable. This stone that you're seeing here, it will become the national treasure of Israel when this becomes a state park. But what happened is this stone was uncovered shortly before the COVID lockdown. This is brand new archaeology. It's in the place that 1 Samuel chapter 6 says that the ark rested. They put it upon a stone and they celebrated, and it rested there for a long, long time. Here's what happened. In Bet Shemesh, they began to dig, and they found carbon-14 dated pottery and soil from the time of 1 Samuel chapter 6. They found a chamber built around this stone, 2 sacrificial stones outside of the chamber for the slaughter of large animals. It could be a bull. The stones are so big with the sluicing off of the blood. I mean, you know exactly what it is. The benches along sides of the stone are the same benches reserved for temple worship. This is an ornamental chamber meant to house this stone. This stone is slightly larger than the dimensions of the ark, but yet it is also proportional to the ark, as it is found in Exodus 25:23. In other words, what you've got is a chapel built around a stone that the Ark of the Covenant rested upon. The Ten Commandments, we believe, rested upon this stone, and the ark was returned to the people of God. Well, here's the lesson as it applies to Emmaus today. Why did I tell you the story? Because God is not a totem. God is not a rabbit's foot. God is not to be carried into battle as some sort of amulet. And we might be tempted to think that this is a Hebrew problem, but this is also a human problem. I'll show you another picture of another time that God was used as a totem. This mountain is called Hattin. I ride by it when I take groups to the Galilee. We don't really stop there because nothing biblical happened there. It's a dormant volcano, but something important did happen there. On July the 4th, 1187, the Crusader armies under the King of Jerusalem went into battle against the Sultan Saladin. Pretty much all the Crusader armies joined together on this thing, and the battle was a complete disaster, and it ended significant Crusader rule in that part of the world forever. It ended that. They had some rear guard crusades, and they had some battles on the coast, but this was pretty much it for Jerusalem. But for our purposes, the reason why I'm telling you about this battle is they too carried a totem. They carried with them into battle what they believed to be the true cross. Now, we've heard some things about the true cross. I'm certain there are reliquaries in Europe that have pieces of the true cross, splinters of the true cross. As a matter of fact, the ship Moskva that was sunk in the Ukrainian-Russian war was reportedly carrying a piece of the true cross upon it, which also relates to the story I'm about to tell you. Where this true cross business happens is it happens when Empress Helena, which is Constantine's mother, builds the Church of the Holy Sepulchre over Golgotha in the early 4th century. So when she builds the church, she believes that she has found the wooden cross upon which Christ died. Now, that's maybe dubious to think about, but that's not our purpose for now. They believed it was the true cross, and they believed it was the true cross, and they fought over it, and they protected it, and they hid it from various Muslim invaders. I mean, it was venerated and cherished, to the point that these Crusader armies took what they believed was an 800-year-old relic, an 800-year-old piece of wood that had held God's own body with them into battle, and they lost it. There's the point. Hophni and Phinehas lost the ark in battle. The Crusader armies lost the true cross forever. Saladin took it to Damascus, never to be found again. And so splinters of it have been, traveling around Europe all this time. Most of them, I think, have been dated, if you could ever get your hands on one, to about 1200 as a reliquary ruse, if you will. But the point is that they believed in battle they had the true cross, and it was gone, just like the ark. God is not a totem. God is not an amulet. God is not a rabbit's foot. Which brings us back to the mystery of Emmaus and a possible answer. We can locate Emmaus, but there's still the problem. It's the wrong direction from Galilee. Well, I think we can solve this problem by looking at this little map I'm going to show you. This is a good clue to understanding. These are pilgrim routes to Jerusalem. Now, I'm sure the Romans probably thought the Jews were the craziest religion of all the subjugated peoples of the world, probably the craziest religion they could ever imagine, because people would walk to Jerusalem at least one time a year for their entire lifetime. If you were living in the Galilee, you walked a 5-day walk at least once for your entire life. And there were 3 ways to get there. There was a way along the Jordan River Valley, and you can see by the map that route was on the eastern shore of the Jordan. Today we go on the western shore of the Jordan because of the simply border problems, but it traces roughly the same highway route, north-south highway. Going down there, you take a right at the Jericho Road and you climb. And what's remarkable about that particular route, that would be the one that Jesus would have walked when he lived in Capernaum, lived in the Galilee. It is the lowest place on planet Earth. You begin with the Sea of Galilee, which is already 800 feet below sea level, and you go down to about 1,400 feet below sea level. It's a moonscape down there. It's dangerous. It's hot. You got to stay close to the water or you'll die. And then you take a ride at Jericho, and you've got to climb 3,000 feet like you're going up to Cashers, North Carolina. But you're starting up out of a hole, and you go straight up this mountain, up the Jericho Road, which is the title of this podcast. The other road, or the middle road, is straight down to Samaria. And I remember asking my friend Edon, why would you travel this horrible road down the Jordan River Valley when it's so hot and dangerous down there? And Edon pointed out that the Samaritan road was a dangerous road. Samaritans hate you. They might kill you, which also lends power, if you will, to Jesus' first parable in Luke's gospel when he decides to go to Jerusalem to die, which is the parable of the Good Samaritan. But you've got two roads there. You've got one down the Jordan River Valley. You've got one down the middle. And then you've got one on the west, which is a highway today, Highway 6. Emmaus sits right off of Highway 6, which is an old Roman road, very near a Roman road called the Via Maris, the way of the sea, if you will. Now, Jesus wouldn't have walked the Via Maris because that's not a direct route to Jerusalem. That's out of the way. I mean, he might have walked it once if he needed to, but the Bible doesn't tell us that he walked it. It wouldn't be logical from either Nazareth or Capernaum to walk the Via Maris, and yet Emmaus is on the Via Maris. It's on a pilgrim road. So here's what I want you to think about. Totems. The Ark of the Covenant was lost in battle. The true cross was lost in battle. Both of those were lessons that God is not a totem. God is not a lucky rabbit's foot. God is not a checked box. Jesus, in his resurrected form, could be more dangerous than he was even dead. Jesus, in his resurrected form, could be rallied around. They could raise an army. They could start the revolution right there. No, Jesus is incognito. And remember what Jesus says to Mary in the garden. Do not hold me, right? I'm going to Galilee. Don't hold me. Don't touch me yet. He's secret and he's quiet. And for this reason, I wonder, and I'm wondering with you, if Jesus didn't need to take a pilgrim road that no one would recognize him on his way back to the Galilee so that he wouldn't be made a totem. God does not want to be our lucky rabbit's foot. God wants to be in relationship with us. And I think that we could also do this. We may not take a box into battle, but we might consider that our churches are plenty, right? If we have church membership and we put in our offering and we keep our noses clean, then we've got a check box and we're in. When God wants us to be in a living, breathing, serving, forgiving, guided, healed, saved by grace relationship every day. Something that is challenging, something that is inspiring, something that is consoling, and something that is life-giving. Not an amulet. I can't say that strongly enough. I believe this Emmaus story is revealing that God wanted to avoid a misuse of the resurrection so that he could get to Galilee and show them who he really is and show them who they really are. It is a wonderful story, Emmaus. And these thoughts about pilgrim roads and totems and this avoidance of our own misuse tells me that Easter is so real. It is so real, and it is so now and today. And that's the story of Emmaus. Friends, thank you so much. I am traveling to Israel after this podcast, and I will bring back some new stories and some new learnings for new chapters of Jericho Road. Thanks, everybody.